So the Nintendo Switch 2 has finally been released, so let's do a comparison between the Nintendo Switch 2 and the original Switch. Let's go. So the first difference that you see between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 is obviously the size. Now this one is the Switch 1 and this has a screen size of 6.2 inches, LCD, 1280 by 720 pixels, which of course is a lot different to the Switch 2. Now the Switch 2 does still have the LCD screen, however it is capable of 4K in docked mode on certain games, so obviously the pixel rating is going to be a lot higher. This one also has a 7.9 inch screen, so as you can see it is a lot larger than the original Switch. Portability wise, of course, the Switch 1 is easier to hold in both hands and it is a lot smaller. Now the Switch 2 I have found is a little bit heavier and it is harder to hold because of the size difference. Now if you have small hands like me, you will find this, whereas if you have big hands, you'll more than likely feel more comfortable with holding a bigger screen. So the weight of the Nintendo Switch 1 is actually 297 grams, which compared to the Nintendo Switch 2 is actually 401 grams, and that is why it feels a lot heftier in your hand if you have always had the original Switch. And of course the sizing of the whole console is completely different. So this one is 102 by 239 by 13.9 millimeters, and the Switch 2 is actually 166 by 272 by 13.99 millimeters. Now on the Switch 1 you only have one USB-C port, which obviously is for the charging and for docking. Now on the Switch 2 you actually have two, which of course is for the docking and the charging, and then there's also one up here, which when the Direct went off no one knew why they had another one here, but now we know it is for a USB camera and it's obviously for charging as well. So there is two ports on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now of course if you turn over the consoles you will see a difference in the kickstand. So on the Nintendo Switch 1 you have this little one that you flick out at the bottom and it breaks, as you can see. As I was saying, obviously as you can see it's very flimsy and it doesn't like to hold up very well, and it's just a little bit of plastic that's just holding one side of the console up. You can also see it snaps very easily, so that one is on there. Then on the Switch 2 I found that this one is a lot easier and a lot better because it's a whole of the console instead of just the little plastic at the back. So when you put it down like this, as you can see it's holding all of the console up at the back rather than just one side of it, and this one feels a bit more sturdier and less plasticky and flimsy like. Another thing that I found that's different on the Nintendo Switch 1 and Switch 2 is the game card slot. So if you open the game card slot on this one, it is just a little flimsy bit like that and it doesn't come all the way out. Now on the Switch 2 I have noticed it's a little bit bigger obviously, and you have to flick it at the bottom instead of the top, and the whole cartridge thing actually comes out, and there's a little metal piece here that covers the game cartridge itself. Now of course there is a big difference between the Joy-Cons on both of these controllers. Now the original console does have different colours all the way throughout. Now I do have the green and the pink ones. I also had the blue and the red ones, but of course I changed the shell of them, so that's why they look a little bit different. But I thought that I would show you the original Joy-Cons from Nintendo so that you can see the difference in the shells. So of course, like I say, I've got the pink and the green ones, which just look like this, and then compare them to the Switch 2 ones, which now look like this. So instead of having the whole colour, they just have a little bit on the sides and under the analog stick as well. So comparing them in size, as you can see, they are a lot bigger in comparison from the original, and there is a bit more curve to the Switch 2 ones. So on the back is exactly the same, it's just a little bit bigger and taller obviously, and then in the middle, which obviously connects to the Joy-Con to the Switch, you have the buttons. Now as you can notice on the Switch 2 the buttons are a lot bigger, so the SL and SR buttons are a lot bigger when you are pressing them instead of them being very, very small. The sync button is still in the same place, so you can obviously attach them to your Switch. And then on the Switch 2 you can see there's a little port here, which is obviously for the magnet when it attaches to the console. So obviously the original Switch 1 has the slip and slide, as I call it, which is the slide attachment onto the console, whereas the Switch 2 obviously has the magnet, so you just push it in like that and it snaps into place. The button on the Switch 2 Joy-Con is a little push button like this, which obviously you can press to release the Joy-Con from the console, whereas on the original ones you press this button to obviously glide it back out. On the original Joy-Cons you can see a little plastic bit underneath. However, now this one on the Switch 2 is covered in the colour instead of just being black, which I don't know whether it's going to be eliminating the amount of dust or anything that goes inside it, because obviously as you can see on this one there's a little bit more space, whereas this one it's not, so it just depends. And obviously on this left controller you still have the capture button as well. Now, another main difference of the Joy-Cons on the Switch 2, you can actually use them as a mouse as well now. So you can have them like this on your mat to control as a mouse for certain games. Obviously you cannot do that on the original ones, but you can now do it on the Switch 2. Now on the right side, as you can see, you have a new button that is on the bottom of the controller for the Switch 2. This is for the chat button, so you can actually play with your friends and you can talk through the Switch console, and obviously on the original ones it does not have that. The home button's still there as well, but there is a slight ring around the original one, whereas it's not on the second one. Then again, the same Joy-Con and the same layout of the buttons. Now I have found the buttons do feel a little bit more clickier, and they are a little bit bigger on the Switch 2 ones rather than the Switch 1, and I quite like how they are a little bit bigger. The feel of them, they feel practically the same. I just think there's no real difference to it, to be honest. This one feels a bit more matte, whereas this feels a bit more shinier material, if that makes sense. So there's not much that's changed there. Like I say, again, the same in the middle for the Joy-Cons, SNL and SNR buttons. There is obviously a sensor there as well, which is for the mouse controls. We are going to do a performance test of how long it takes to turn on the console, how long it takes to load a game, how long it takes to do everything, basically. Right, let's do a performance test of how long it takes to turn them on. Ooh. So actually the Nintendo Switch 1 took that millisecond less than the Switch 2. What? That's crazy! Okay, now we're going to open the menu. So as you can see, the Switch 1 took significantly a lot more time to load Mario Kart than the new one. Obviously it is both different games, but I thought that I would test it with a similar game. So as you can see on the Nintendo Switch 1, I have 24GB left on my system memory, which this Switch console only comes with 32GB anyway, but on the Switch 2 you have up to 256GB, which I've obviously downloaded Mario Kart World as a digital version, and now I have 206GB. So that is why you don't really need a micro SD express card, but if you do and you have more games, then you'll more than likely need it. So that's the difference between Switch 1 and Switch 2. You have the micro SD card in here, but it will not work in a Switch 2. You need an express card instead. But there is a lot of difference between the system memory, like I say, 32GB versus 256GB. Now another thing to note within the settings is you have the audio option on the Switch 2 and not on the Switch 1. Now this is for chat when you're in docked mode, or in general when you're speaking to friends that you have on your Nintendo Switch. And obviously you can test each one. So if I test the microphone, you'll be able to hear my voice inside of it, and then this is what the audio sounds like from the console. Testing, testing, 1, 2, testing, testing. Testing, testing, 1, 2, testing, testing. So that is what the microphone sounds like. Within the console, obviously you can test the console speakers as well. which if you play the sound, you can hear it from the left, from the centre, from the right, and from the controllers. So that is one difference between Switch 1 and Switch 2. Obviously has the chat mode, which enables you to talk and listen through the console. Now another difference between the Switch 1 and Switch 2 is obviously the battery and the size of the battery in it. So in the Switch 1 you have a battery of a 4310 milliamp, and then in the Switch 2 you have a 5220 milliamp. I have not fully tested how long this is going to last on a full charge, so it might differ, but apparently online, according to the things that I've read, this lasts 4.5 to 9 hours on one single charge, and then this lasts 2 to 6.5 hours, which is a big difference to say this has got a bigger battery in it. Obviously I've not done a full test on that because I have not had it very long and I've not had a full charge on it yet, so I don't know 100% of how long it's going to last. So with that, we are going to test the Mario Kart World. I am actually going to turn the screen brightness up on here so you can actually see it a little bit more. So we have Mario Kart World, which is obviously the brand new Mario Kart that comes with the Switch 2, which is not obviously compatible with the Switch 1, so if you're wanting to play this game then you have to buy this console. Another thing with the Switch 2 and the Switch 1 is, of course, the dock has changed. So this is the new Switch 2 dock. As you can see, it's very curved and it's a little bit larger than the original one. I can't get both of them in the same frame, but there is the original one and then there is the new one. Now on the back of the Nintendo Switch 2 dock, you have to pull it off, and this whole thing comes off, in which you can put your adapter in it, your HDMI, and also a LAN as well, which is for the internet. Now on the original one you do not have the LAN connector. And then of course obviously you've got the fans as well, and then the ones underneath. Then at the side of the dock you also have 2 USB ports, which obviously can be used for either your camera or whatever else you need to put inside, which is like your controller, for example. On the original Switch dock, on the side, you also have the 2 USB connectors, and then on this one it actually flips down and you have the AC adapter, another USB port, and a HDMI out port, which again you do not have the LAN port, which you do have the new one. So it only has 3 ports. And of course the last difference between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 is obviously the price. Now when this was first released, this was actually priced at $279.99. Now this one, however, was $329 without Mario Kart, and if you bought it with Mario Kart, which obviously I did, it was $429.99. So depending on whether you get the game or not is obviously a little bit more expensive. So there is a big price jump from the original Switch and the Switch 2, but of course there is a little bit more to the Switch 2 than there is in the Switch 1. That is the comparison between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. Let me know in the comments which one that you prefer and whether you have the Switch 2 in your hands and I've got it from release day, and what you think about it in the comments. So if you did enjoy that video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe because there'll be more Nintendo Switch 2 content coming very soon, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!